we do find ourselves in a very difficult situation in the world at large today. And although we won't be directly addressing the atrocities that have been occurring here, particularly in the US, we feel it's really important to consider what contributes to those underlying animosities and biases that enable injustices, inequity, and inequality to be so pervasive. So in our conversation tonight, we'll be reflecting on the lenses with which we experience, perceive, and design within the world, and how in that reflection we can be better citizens and designers. Many of you notated on the map when you joined the call tonight where you're from. And as a first reflection, we wanted to take a look at this map and explore how our lens and mindset are oriented. So with this specific map, you can see here that this is a political map. Many of you may be familiar with it growing up. It's actually called a Mercator projection map, which means that our perspective is skewed in terms of our relative size of which we see the world. So if your country is further from the equator, it's going to look larger than it is. And the closer to the equator, it's going to look more insignificant. The thinking behind that is that that can lead to embedded biases about how we view the world. So if something looks smaller and less significant, we lend less credibility to it. And so we want to start just by orienting ourselves to what do we consider normal. Sometimes we look at this, we think of a normal map, but we don't necessarily think about how that might influence our bias. So just for a dash of perspective, on this map, Greenland looks quite large, when in reality, relative to the continent of Africa, it's quite small when we look at its proportions. To orient, we want to think about what's the true size of Africa and reorient our perspective. And when we look at it, we see that it encompasses all of Eastern Europe, two of the most populous countries in the world, China and India in terms of size, and the United States, not to mention all the other countries. So as our speaker Mauricio guides us on this mindset journey together, we hope that you'll explore your own personal assumptions and contexts and try on some new lenses, just as we're reorienting here. So I'm going to hand it over to Kelly, who's going to introduce us to our speaker.
Awesome. Thanks, Jean Marie. And this was a really insightful walkthrough. I'm hoping it was able to resonate with you all as initial brain stimulus as we transition into today's talk. So we hope that during today, you're able to try on a different lens and consider shifting your mindset in certain areas that you design for as well as perceive in everyday society. So in saying this, we all want to welcome you to the first part of this mindset series on postmodernity. And feel free, if you have any questions, to type them in the chat box. Jean Marie will be sending an example now so that you can see how that looks. But if you have any questions throughout the talk, we'll be addressing that within Mauricio's presentation. So throw it out there and we'll try our best to make sure we get it covered. So with no further ado, I want to introduce our speaker for today. Mauricio Manjaes is the Service Design Graduate Program Coordinator and a Professor of Service Design at the Savannah College of Art and Design, known as SCAD, in Savannah, Georgia. And he is also an Associate Design Researcher at LiveWork. He holds the role as a group lead of the Service Design Network Academic Task Force as well. So many backgrounds. This man is a jack of all trades. So I want to pass it over to our lovely Mauricio to take it from here.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Kelly, Asa, Priya, Jean Marie, for the support so far. Without much wait, we can jump into the setting the stage. Just thank you all. I know this is and when we're discussing about this, is a very tough subject to discuss, but we all, I hope, during the course of the 3 meetings, you'll see how, or you'll be able to see how important it is to discuss the mindset. So mindset, just to setting the context, we will have three meetings. The first one, Postmodernity. I compare this to a Russian doll. Postmodernity will give you the context. Next meeting, we will explore the places of truth. And then the third one, we will explore the knowledge and human interest, which is at the core of everything that we will be talking here. Why the service design mindset? Why, when they invited me to host this event, we had just had the homecoming, service design homecoming in Savannah on the February 21st and 2nd, and the theme was organizational adaptability. 1 month later, after what happened with the pandemic, I started to get calls from all over the place, praising the timely choice of the event, the themes event, and this prompted me to realize that no, this theme is actually old, as we're going to discuss next today, actually. And so it raises the question, we need to discuss the mindset, right? Service design mindset was the first objective or goal, but now it became, the theme became much more broad and important, given what's happening in the US and throughout the world, both with the pandemic and here in the US with the latest events. Okay, so that's just to give you why we chose to talk about mindset instead of tools or methods. And what we're going to be discussing is the mindset of this person here. There's a theory, the theory of elite revolutions, that revolutions only occur by when led or organized by well-educated people. And this person here wearing a mask with the symbol of the 60s, the fist in the air, giving, having her back the police. She's not an ordinary person. She knows her rights. She knows what's happening. She's a very conscious person. She's the type of person that we need now. And throughout the ages of the history, from Toussaint to Zapata, Guevara to Gandhi, Washington, Castro, Lenin, Mandela, Mao, Bolivar, all these revolutions were led by people that knew what they were doing. Okay, they were educated. All of them had definitely above average education when compared to the population of their time. And even now, quantum physics and the front line research is saying that we need to have a new mindset to understand these anomalies, right? They call anomalies. I don't think that they are anomalies. We will discuss about this. I think they are just one of the elements of complex adaptive systems, and we'll be able to discuss this at some point in more details. One thing that I consider is important is the scientific mindset. Okay, I go to Carl Sagan and bring his perspective on science that is not just knowledge, it's a way of skeptically interrogating the universe with a fine understanding of human fallibility. And this is necessary to avoid us fall prey to the next charlatan, political, or religious who comes ambling along. So we will be presenting those points with a very critical perspective, hoping that it will provide not only to service designers a better way to see the world and act as a service designer, but to all of us. I'm really honored to have you here discussing such a complex subject, and this is our contribution to raising the awareness of our community, right? So we will talk about the elephant in the dark room. We'll talk about mindset, and it's more than understood that we don't see things like Heisenberg says, we don't see nature, we don't observe anything, but we observe what our mindset enables us to observe. And let's shed some light into what this elephant in the dark room is. And so mindset here will be defined by the process of filtration that we do in order to understand the world around us, right? So we have, if you follow these arrows here, we have a limited ability to absorb information. The world around us in the step 2 is complex, ambiguous, dynamic. We're overwhelmed by information. So we tend to filter this information, having or allowing access only to some part of this environmental information that we are exposed to. And this is what we define as a mindset. And why discussing about exposing this elephant in the dark room? Because also we have plenty of research that says that only by being exposed at your own mindset will you be able to change it. Okay, so that's what's gonna guide us through these 3 events. We're not providing or preaching a certain mindset. We want to provide to all of us, based on the most let's say, consistent and trustworthy research, how can you understand your mindset? And how can you understand your mindset given the history that brought us here, okay? So just to give a context now, some disclaimers, setting the transparency level of these meetings. First, no safety net. Of course, we will be dealing with very complex subjects. I'm by no means a philosopher, so I will count on your questions and our interaction to refine and clarify the discussions we will be having. Okay. By no means I'll be able to provide you the right path or a solution for the situation, the complex situation that we're living in. being more transparent. So in terms of science, you have two ways of verifying a theory. So either partially, like in math, and you can verify very small. This is like the reductionist, if you ever heard, or positivist perspective. You break things apart and you verify each piece. We will not be there. We will be trying to provide an unifying perspective that is by definition unverified. So if you think, oh, what Moniz is saying is not very correct or precise, you're right. We were trying to make sense of what's happening in an unifying way. And here I'm supported by Paul Ricoeur, and I present this excerpt here just to justify the seriousness that we're undertaking and the limitation that we are very much aware that this effort has, okay? So no way, by no means, there's no intention of providing a path, a method to see the world here. We will provide you basic research results that will lead you or support you to make your own reflections, okay? Because of course, like Einstein says, and this is my paradigmatic image of science, the important thing is to never stop questioning. So please feel free to question whatever I said. It's by our discussion that we all will understand how to face what's happening. Another aspect, whatever I will be saying here will only be valid if all of you feel included, okay? If one of you, one of us will feel offended or not included in what we're talking or presenting, whatever I'll be presenting is not valid. Okay, we will discuss why this is so important in the places of truth, but our challenge here is to find a narrative that will make sense to all of us. Okay, so without much, let's start. So this was just a prep. Now let's start our presentation. Any questions so far? Any interactions? Can you hear me? It's all good?
Yeah, it's all good from our end.
Okay. So this is the first question, right? Do you know yourself? Do we know ourselves? What is the mindset that guides us? How can we tap into this? Because that's one of the quotes, and I'll be using several of the quotes throughout this presentation. I think this is a very poignant statement from Plato, that he says that until you know yourself, knowing other things are irrelevant, okay? So this is kind of the ultimate challenge that we are trying to provide us, to all of us, the opportunity of knowing us better so we can actually know what's happening around us better. And of course, we will go through history to try to understand how we got here. And history here, I'll be using history not as a picture of the past or a true representation of the past, but as a reflection of about the present. Okay, we will use stories from the past to think about us today, and we will abuse history at our own risk. Okay, this is a sign that we have all over Savannah. We have old stairs, stone, made of stone throughout the city. And there's always a sign, historic steps, abuse at your own risk. And this is exactly what we're gonna do, okay? So let's start. Just to give a big history perspective, the way we are genetically, biologically, started, or we were formed, or the first signs or evidence that we are the way we are started 150,000 years ago, okay? And from 50,000 years ago until around 40,000 years, there was very little evidence that we were not much more than another animal, okay? And at 40,000 years ago, it's not a precise date, okay? There was the creative explosion. For the first time, we start to see objects like this, the Lion Man, which is an object that does not occur in nature. It's not something that was copied, was seen in nature. It's something that came out of our minds, right? Out of the mindset. And one of the hypotheses that we have, or ideas that we have that occurred, language was created by that time. And language as a way to abstract things got so complex and so well developed that enabled us to create things that were not physical, right? Up to this point, we had a lot of already developed tools, but tools that were very connected to reality, okay? They were either weapons or knives or things to cut, or to feed ourselves. But at this point, we find an object that has no physical purpose. And this is the moment that historians and archaeologists believe that we became ourselves, okay? From the moment that we were able to create what was not around us, and we became ourselves. So it's like we started to create useless objects, useless coma, in what we consider today would be art. What we believe happened at this point, we detached ourselves from nature, okay? We start to see ourselves as something different than the animals. We are not part of nature anymore. And we perceived that we knew more than a cow, okay? But nevertheless, we couldn't know everything. We didn't know why it was raining, why I'm here, why the cow is there. And this led us to create some kind of a line of development that led us to induce that someone could know all the answers, okay? And in around 12,000 years ago, we figure out that we could explain everything by relating to an abstraction, right? So up to this point, we didn't know why it was raining. We didn't know why we were here. And in an extraordinary step, the next day, we could explain everything, okay? Why it was raining? Oh, because God XYZ wanted. Why I'm here? Because the gods, we name this abstraction God, but it was actually this interest, this knowledge interest started before, okay? So at some point, in an extraordinary step, we could explain everything. And this is the point that we will focus more from this moment that we could explain things to today. And that's an invitation to buckle up and brace for impact, because we're going to go through 12,000 years in a few slides. First, Premodern. 12,000 years ago, we, as I said, we killed nature. Of course, nature wasn't killed, but nature was not anymore like us. It was a material, an object to be molded. So nature is dead, gods control all, or the abstract control all, and there is an order. We start to seek for this abstract order on things. And the most interesting and spectacular achievement of this first step we did was the invention of religion. 50 years ago, here, instead of religion, you would read society. Today, most archaeologists believe that society was created because of religion. And there are very interesting evidence that come. It seems that the wheat we eat, the cattle, the animals that we tend to eat through agriculture and to feed us, their genetics comes back to these particular hills. So 12,000 years ago, hundreds or maybe thousands of people gathered in these hills to create enormous structures. So you can see here, just to give a sense of scale, enormous structures that were never inhabited. It was not a city, and they would use this for a while, bury them, and then build another. And this site was used as a religious site for thousands of years, even before we had our first cities. Okay, so the archaeologists, they believe that in order to organize these people around this religion, we had to create society, agriculture, and organize hierarchies and everything. This paradigm of having an abstraction as a guiding lasted until the Enlightenment. So this was the predominant paradigm. Everything should have we longed for and sought for an order into anything. And this order was outside of us. It was an abstract order. At some point around the Enlightenment, we start to see that we were giving and providing order to things, okay? And there was a very important shift towards what we call modernity around 1400, when we start to realize that all these things, all this order that we used to attribute to external, to the physical world, let's say, most of them were products of our own mindset. And this starts modernity, right? God is dead. The same way that we killed nature, we understood that worship was an object for design, for work. So we start to create concepts of worships to nation, to brands, institutions. We start to thoughtfully design those institutions to be worshipped. And the main paradigm is that we controlled everything, and everything order can be established by tangible superior entities, which were us, humans. And the most interesting achievement of this period was the scientific revolution that brought us the industrial revolution. One thing that is interesting here is, like, since we started to believe that we could control everything, we were able to create things that enable us to control. So before, there was no point for humans to dream to go to the moon, because we couldn't decide. We can't fly. There's an order in everything, and humans don't fly, so humans will never go to the moon. From the moment we decide that we can control things, we are the ones who control things. If we want to go to the moon, we go to the moon. If we want to fly, we will fly. If we want to go to the deepest ocean, we will, because the order is not given. We make the order, right? We are the creators of orders. And this lasted from 1400, 1500 to the Second World War. And here is a very interesting image, of course, with the faces of people hidden here. This is the liberation of Auschwitz. And I want you to pay attention to this slogan here. Arbeit macht frei, which means the work makes you free. If you put yourself to work, you will get what you want. It's a very modern slogan, right? I can control, if I put myself to work, I will control my destiny. And what is interesting about this picture is that the prisoners were sent through this gate to death under the slogan, you will work and you will be free. And the second way to look at this picture is that the Nazi that believed that they would, if working hard, they could control their destiny, they lost the war. So none of the people that walked through this gate, this modern gate, actually were able to control their destiny. Okay, so this is the moment where modernity dies, and then we don't respect anymore. Human is dead the same way. We can kill people in industrial scale. We don't control anything. There's no respect. It's not a godlike entity, and we start to understand that systems control all. The world, the universe, everything is a self-establishing system of entities. If you know a little bit about autopoiesis, it's kind of this. And one of the most interesting concepts we have is the one named Punctuated Equilibrium that we will be exploring a little bit today, but throughout these three series. Okay, so the reflection we have, the first one is, when we look to the past, what we see is this punctuated equilibrium, right? Um, the world didn't change. We could have reached the moon thousands of years before if we had the right mindset. Okay? So it took us 12,000 years almost to get from believing that there was an order in everything and our work was to find the order, shifting. So we had the same brain, the same, like the computational power throughout more than 100,000 years. And we didn't achieve much until we developed language, and then a paradigm, and then change this paradigm. And what we see looking back, it's always this punctuated equilibrium. What is punctuated equilibrium? Is long, stable infrastructures. The system, this is a dynamic of systems. The system kind of keeps itself stable, and in short periods, it changes completely. So we just saw one of these events, the pandemics, that we thought we knew how to run things. No, we're controlling this. I know how to, my business, Uber, whatever, each business, now it's all under control. I'm powerful, I can control everything. And then a virus that cannot even be seen changes everything. And this is what is punctuated equilibrium. You think you're flying, during the stasis, you're not flying, you're being carried out by the flow, right? It's like, oh, I know how to swim. No, it's the river that's taking you. And once these punctuated equilibrium, these punctuations occur, you realize that you didn't have control over what was going on. So, and this is another thing too that is interesting. So if we compare each punctuation to an earthquake, so the next earthquake starts at the end of the previous one. The geologist can tell you this. So things will be building up, and then it will erupt or disrupt. And by the very moment that we get to a new normal, the next one is building up. It starts building up, okay? So the longing that we are having, oh, I want to go back to normal. Know that the next earthquake is started. And this is an interesting dynamic to work with. So far, all good?
Yeah, we've got a few questions in the chat. So our first question is that, is nature just a set of self-establishing system of entities?
Yes, nature is a complex adaptive system, right? Like society, it's just a kind of complex adaptive system. And all complex adaptive systems that are not chaotic are complex, right? They tend to stay for a while in what we call stasis, right? It's like your body. Your body stays there no matter if you went out and drank too much. Your body comes back and you're still here, and you cope, and after some headaches and hangovers, you're back on track. But the system builds back and keeps in stasis, right? So nature is just one type of complex adaptive system.
We have enough questions for this interval, enough time just for one more question. So how is this fundamentally different from a modern mindset? Someone is asking. It feels as an extension. What marks the emergence of punctuation?
Yeah, that good question. So we will see at the end, we will have a question to reflect each one of us to understand if you're pre-modern, modern, or postmodern, and kind of position yourself in this discussion. But it's very hard today to go back and think like we thought 200 years ago, 150 years ago, right? But for the modern mind, everything was controllable. We could control absolutely everything. There was nothing. What we couldn't control was because we didn't study enough, we didn't work enough. Arbeit macht frei, right? We didn't work enough, but if we work enough, we will control everything. And since 1945, we don't believe this anymore. So this is the main difference, right? The modernists, they had this, it's difficult to talk about this today, but if you go back or 1,000 years ago, when people believed in that the order was given by something abstract, external, the same thing, there's no question about if something happened to you, it was part of the plan, right? And the moderns, they said, no, there's no plan. My plan is the plan. I will do whatever I want to do. And we learned in 1945 that this was not the case.
Right. That's interesting to also consider from a design perspective, how we can consider these shifting and mindsets and paradigms and the implementation into how we can incorporate that. I wonder if we can move on. I see we have a couple more questions. Maybe we can address those at the end. I just want to save time for the rest of your presentation, Mauricio. So
okay,
we'll get to them. Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah.
So how do we know that this happened? What are the proofs that what you're talking about, I guess, was kind of the discussion we had previously in the question that the person asked, what is the difference between modern and postmodern, right? How do you apprehend reality? This is a timeline, 150,000 years ago, 50,000, 12,000, 5,000, 75, and today. We have several evidence, physical evidence that show this path. The first one is the first human skeleton that are very similar to us. Then we have around 50,000 years ago, the creative explosion, and we have the lion man as a physical evidence. We have the temples in Göbekli Tepe. We have the first writings, the clays, 5,000 years ago, and 75 years ago, we have the modern computer. So we have a layer of physical things that help us understand those milestones. Then we have social reality that was recorded somehow, or at least suggested, like the language that must have happened somewhere before 50,000 years ago. Then we have the first glimpse of art and the creative explosion here in 50,000 years. We have Göbekli Tepe building the temples from which we understand there was some kind of religious activity going on. From the writing, with 4,500 years of delay, we have science happening. And then because of this scientific revolution, we were able to how do you say this? We end up with the Second World War. So the Second World War is a direct result of modernity. And again, let me put this clearly. Everything that I'm talking or telling or presenting has a very clear bias. It's based on continental Europe perspective, okay? So I completely understand if people from all other regions in the world don't see this as something important, but based on the work of the philosophers that I tend to study, which are mostly Europeans, continental Europeans, the Second World War and science and religion and art and language are important markers of social reality. And then finally, when we realize these shifts in paradigm, we start to look at personal realities, and then we go back to mindset, right? And say, wow, when we look back, we see there were three very distinct kinds of mindset that now we call premodern, modern, and postmodern. And because modern is where science was born, and this is a kind of a scientific approach, and very egocentric. The scientific approach calls this, the modern is the birthplace, and then everything that came before is pre-modern, everything that came after is postmodern, okay? So first, what we understand from reading those philosophers and researchers, we were concerned about the objective reality. And it's a very interesting, because by trying to control the objective reality, the physical reality, we end up focusing on the abstraction, because we couldn't talk to a tree, we couldn't talk to a stone. So we had to talk to an abstraction of this tree, an abstraction of this stone, right? The materials. So we took us 100,000, 150,000 years to kind of explore how to control and understand this physical reality. Then, after we kind of understood, and by the Enlightenment, we said, okay, we had enough. We know how to control things, the world around us. What else we have to try to understand? And then we understood, we start to kind of turn towards us. And this marks the intersubjective reality, right? The modern is very human-centered. The modern perspective, of course, if you believe that humans are godlike creatures, you start worshiping humans. So it's very funny to hear designers talking about human-centeredness, because human-centered from this perspective is, or ended in 1945. And most of the pollution that we're having is due to human-centeredness. I don't care about the environment. Well, as long as I have air conditioning. So this is a very human-centered approach. And finally, in postmodernity, we start to think about, hey, no, we need to understand better what happens inside people's mind. not the biology, not the physicality of the mind, but exactly the language of the mind. What happens? And we start to get really interested by people's mind and uniqueness and different perspectives. So this marks postmodernity. In a nutshell, it's like growing up. At first, when we are, if you remember when you were a child, you tend to look to outside for the truth, right? Parents, what should I do? Can I go there? What time should I sleep? So we had that the truth, reality was outside us. And the modernity marks kind of teenager, right? My parents are stupid. Everybody's stupid. Only I'm the only one who knows everything. And I know better because I have 15 years old. And postmodernity is, you can map. Of course, I'm pushing here, right? It's like my particular perspective of these three paradigms, the sequence of that they have. That the postmodern is more maturity and say, no, yeah, I know what I believe, but I accept what others believe would be the mindset of postmodernity. The problem, I guess, is that we don't have a very clear ends, right? Those dates that I present you, they are, again, abstract. So the pre-modern, just to put this into a perspective, so the pre-modern was focused on abstraction. Like I told you, you can't talk to a stone, you can't talk to materials, so you have to have a story, an abstraction of this material, and an order of this material to talk to. And this became embedded in texts. And it's not by coincidence that most religions in the world are based on books, right? You give voice to the abstract by writing. And the book, we still use books, right? Then human-centeredness, I love me. So this is the space in time between 1400 and 1945 that we believed that we could control anything. We were the gods. We were actually creating gods. Religions were created by humans, and the humans can control anything. And from 1945 on, we became system-centered. And some historians relate the development of the internet as a result of this mindset, this mind shift. We could have developed, as I said, we could have flown way hundreds of years before, but the kind of interest that were made into mindset by the end of the modern age is the kind of mindset that is very much interested by systems. And so it's interesting to say, when you read, oh, the internet is changing us. And it's based on this literature, it's the other way around. We are creating the internet based on this paradigm shift that we had in 1945. So for us to understand this mess, we need to understand that there are, the pre-modern lasted 12,000 years. The pre-modern casts a lot of shadows into the modern. So we see a lot of scientists preaching like pre-modernist. Things like you have to walk 10,000 steps per day, like an abstract law that applies to everybody, no matter where, no matter when, no matter who, is a pre-modern statement. Any scientist that would tell you that something is true and period, and this is the unquestionable truth, is a pre-modern. This scientist is not a scientist, is not a scientist yet. Okay, so we see a lot of overlapping. The same thing with postmodern, modern people, right? We have this mixed message all across the board. And just to make it a little bit clear, so this represents like a timeline, the three main paradigms, and the human, or the modern one, was very much contaminated, let's say, by the abstraction. And the same one with the systems now was very much contaminated by, contaminating not in a bad way, please, it's just because it is. Like we're humans, we mix everything. So being able to untangle this is one of the challenges for us to understand the mindset. And it's way, way more confusing than you might expect. So you can see the abstract, the pre-modern. If you think about religion, they have the 10 Commandments, which is an abstract law, but they also have the free will. And then you also have religions that have many gods, right? It's almost endless. The same thing with the modern. They have the laws of physics, and then at the same time you have the Industrial Revolution that breaks the laws of physics, and you also have the first concerns on ecology. If you take the systemic, that one of the best ways to talk about this is art. In art, you still have the golden rules. You cannot, or the color theory, or the wheel of color, but you have to obey exactly. And then at the same time, you have the cubism, that is a self-expression of Picasso. That's the way I see the world, and you all have to take it. And the postmodernists that tend to create, and the social media is an example, that everybody creates and distorts and mashups. So there's the process that you need to go through is to untangle this rationality, right? What is that? What I say is pre-modern, from what I say, what is postmodern, and what is modern. And of course, mentioning Whitman, we contain multitudes, right? We are all these things, although the paradigms completely contradict themselves in terms of logic, but we are all, we mix them and use them interchangeably. And one of the examples, the classic example is this: who never asked some sort of question similar to this one? I want to know, please tell me what's the best process, method, path for me to control my life and my destiny in this uncertain context, right? So this, you can see the three paradigms tangled, right? And of course, there's no process that serves to everybody, everywhere, every time. you will not be able to control your life in the modern perspective, right? We kind of understand this. And what's left is uncertainty, okay? But we're still asking for processes that are regular, general to everybody, no matter what. We're still trying to control our lives. But what we saw after 1945 is that what's left is the uncertain context. Okay? Questions?
Thanks, Mauricio. We are having a very active chat session going. We do have quite a few questions. We are running a little behind, so we'll probably only have time for one or two. The first question that we have is, would a system designed for the betterment of human lives and experiences also be categorized as human-centered?
A system designed for the human betterment, right? I would ask this person, how do you define design? You define design as from a modern perspective, that design will enable you to control the system, or you design from a postmodern perspective that you will co-evolve and tinker and try to adapt, and at the end you didn't control the system, right? So again, that's what I might be wrong, but the way the person asked, if you think about, oh, and if I design the system, will I be, from a modern perspective, you think you can actually control the system? And we will talk about design and innovation in the next, from these three perspectives, right? We will discuss the pre-modern perspective design. No, there is a process that applies everywhere to everyone, and this is design. The modern, no, design is the designer. We design the world, the world design us back. We're controlling this. And there is a postmodern version of design that is the one of them. I'll try to tap in as many as possible, but one of them is the co-evolution of problem and solution spaces. So you don't even know what you're doing. You launch yourself into a problem space and act as this system evolves through time. I don't know if I answered, but that's the reflection that we are proposing here. Like, are you asking from which perspective are you asking? When you say, if we design a system for the betterment of humankind, do you think that you're designing following an abstract process that will guarantee no matter who, no matter what, that you achieve? Do you think that design is because you're designing and you're controlling and you will get whatever you want to get? Or you're designing in this way that we will discuss with what it means, co-creation, collaboration from a postmodern perspective, right? In a collaborative way that you don't have the authorship of what you're doing.
Well, Mauricio, you managed to actually answer two questions in one. We had another question that says, what are the different ways pre-modern, modern, and postmodern define design? And what I heard you say was in the postmodern, it's around co-evolution of problem and spaces, and we'll be exploring that in one of the future series events.
Yeah.
All right, we have some other great questions. I want to put them on hold so we can get through your content. So I'm going to turn it back to you, and then anything we haven't captured yet, we will cover at the end of the session.
Perfect. All good. Can I have a sense of people around? Are you following? Are you? It's too fast, too slow? No. Nobody.
You're killing it, Mauricio.
Thank you, Bianca. I don't trust you. You're suspect.
What?
No, you would say that I'll be doing well no matter what. So it's like asking a father, a parent being asked, "Dad, am I beautiful?" Of course you're beautiful. Right? It's like this.
That's so true. You are right.
Yeah.
Mauricio,
So, yeah,
I'll tell you the truth. It's great. Keep going.
you're suspect.
And
So,
Mauricio, someone mentioned examples help too. So just to keep in mind as you're moving along for further clarity.
how? So sorry. Examples on how?
Examples pertaining to the content that you're sharing
Okay.
and the mindsets. Yeah.
Okay. So let's make the classic question to try to understand reality as a system, right? So if I ask you, what is a share? Can you all see this instruction here? If you could annotate on the screen, how do you define a share? What is a share?
Yeah, so let's take some time, everyone, using the annotate feature and similar to how we all used it at the beginning of the session. At the top of your screen under view options, you can annotate your response to what is a chair.
Oh, this means that a chair is a dot, a red dot, place to park my butt. However, someone uses the find it, place to sit, from, okay. Object, closing, rack, yeah, can be. Yeah, a place to sit, profits, an idea. Good, good, good. I love that, a place to park my butt. That's gravity stop. Awesome. A rest from standing. So people, that's enough. Awesome. A significant location. Do I have to? How do I go to the next? If I go to next, I erase this.
Yeah, I can erase it for you right quick. I took a screenshot just in case to capture.
Okay. So
there you go.
Some of the things that we define is it's something to sit on, right? But again, if you define this abstraction so clear cut, it's something to sit on. From a postmodern perspective, you lose the thing you're trying to understand. Because if you define as something to hold your butt or to stop gravity, or in any short sentence, everything becomes a chair, right? A table, if you sit on a table, it becomes a chair. The floor becomes a chair. Everything becomes a chair. Okay? And this is a very, sorry, I said modern is a postmodern definition. The postmodern perspective would define objects, people, whatever, by very short sentences. And when you define an object or whatever, people applies to everything, by a short sentence, you lose what you're trying from a postmodern perspective, right? For the pre-modern, if you didn't have a short, sharp sentence to define something, you didn't have anything. But then we saw that this is not possible. That like a chair can be actually made of different things, right? Different materials. So I can't actually define a chair by the material, right? It can be wood, can be plastic, can be rubber, can be, although it cannot be a sponge. If I create a chair made of sponge, it's not a chair, right? A chair needs to be made to be a chair, designed to be a chair, sold and bought to be a chair, engineered to be a chair. Sometimes you buy a chair that the first time that you see it, it breaks. It was not engineered to be a chair. It was engineered to sell you something very cheap and take your money, but it was not a chair. So a chair needs to have a purpose, either to work, to decorate, to show status, right? I'm the boss. Or to be a ladder, or someone said clothes, support clothes, or to be a piece of art, right? So how come all these things can be a chair, right? And it can be grown, right? A chair can be grown. It's not even the production, the industrial production. You can grow a chair. It takes 2.5 years or 3, but you can grow a chair. So how come all these things are chairs, right? They are all chairs only if you have in your mind a system, okay? So sometimes people make fun of service designers saying, oh, a chair is a service. And people, they are their own drugs. No, how come a chair is a service? No, you're saying that service as a specific, small, humble type of system. You can only understand that this object is a chair because you understand the system that you have in your mind, okay? So when you say chair, you're not pointing to these objects. You're pointing to this system that is in your head for this mindset. And every and anything that fits into this system, you will recognize as a chair, okay? So this is a way that postmodernity say that this should be your main way to see things, okay? You cannot reduce, oh, Black people or women or gay or by a single sentence. It's not because you're good or you're being discriminatory or being evil. No, you're being dumb. You're wrong, right? That from a postmodern perspective, you can't, it's technically, so let's talk very modernistic perspective, is just dumb to label anything by a short sentence. It doesn't make sense from a postmodern perspective. In order for you to understand someone, something, you need to pile, to stack so many things. And and as I said, no matter if you're talking about a chair or a company or a person, right? If you want to grasp accurately something from a postmodern perspective, you need to stack, to add a ton of things. Otherwise, you're daydreaming, you're far from reality. This is one of the criticisms that postmodern perspective receives. Is like, no. Then anything goes. If a chair is a service, then we lost everything. And it's exactly the opposite. Because now you can see things in terms of system, now we have a chance to actually get closer to reality. Okay, so this is one of the amazing things when you read these people and you get to, oh my God, by doing this, I'm actually achieving what modernity kind of tried of actually, and Premodern, actually get to know things, okay? And Berthoff says that, in other words, any entity is what it is only within a network of relations. So instead of being an atomic existence, it is in fact holistic. So Since 1945, we've been listening to a lot of people talking about systems, perspective, holistic, and kind of we take this from a modern perspective and don't get, no, what they're saying is that unless you're uneducated, you will see things from a holistic perspective. It's not, we tend to see holistic and systemic and collaborative as something cute and good. No, no, it's either you do systemically or you're just dumb, right? It's just, that's the, you don't have a choice. I'm gonna be inclusive because I'm kind. No, no, it's either being dumb or actually get something done. So that's the sharpness that from a pre-modern perspective, it seemed that you're not being sharp. You're being fuzzy. No, no, no. I'm getting close to reality because exactly I'm closer to reality than you. If you define a chair as something to sit on, you're daydreaming. You're like completely delusional. By defining a chair as this collection of systems, I'm actually, and people that seeing the chair from the systemic perspective are actually closer to reality than people that define this in a very abstract way. Okay?
Yeah, Mauricio, I'm loving this conversation that we're having. I know we're approaching time and a few people might have to hop off. Maybe we can wrap up in the next minute, answer a few questions, and then
I'll do.
Close. Yeah, sounds good.
We're about to end. So the same thing, let's see the Amazon system, right? For you to understand the Amazon forest here, you have to understand that there is a, if you try to understand the Amazon forest just by looking at the Amazon forest and going to the soil, you see that the soil is a desert, right? If you dig in the Amazon soil, you see that it's desert. And in order to understand why the largest forest on earth is there, you have to understand that there is a wind, a stream, airstream circling the world. You need to understand there is a Sahara desert that heats this stream. You need to understand that there is an ocean between the two. So this air full of dust and hot soaks the ocean here. And because there is, if there was not a wall here called the Andes, this stream would take this water to the Pacific. But then there's a wall that this flying ocean hits, and then you have the largest ocean river on earth flowing, okay? So, and then you have the Amazon forest, okay? And the same logic can be applied to organizations, right? If you want to understand like how the Amazon, the e-commerce is so successful, you can see it from three perspectives. The pre-modern. Amazon has the best strategy. They have the perfect processes. They have the perfect organizational structure. If I want to be as successful as Amazon, the only thing I need to do is copy their abstract structure, right? So they are successful because of their abstract structure. From a modern perspective, Amazon's success was because a human, right? And if you consider that these philosophers that I'm mentioning here are from continental Europe, this human that is responsible for Amazon success must be a white male, right? And so this white male could be successful no matter what. He would have created an equivalent of Amazon no matter what, because so what I need to do if I want to be successful, I need to copy and read whatever he does. And if I copy whatever he does, I'll be successful. from a postmodern perspective, the whole thing changes. So there was no perfect abstract that serves every time, everywhere process. There was no human controlling this. The whole thing was a self-establishing system, which emerged to be Amazon. Okay, a company like Amazon would have existed no matter if Jeff Bezos would be born or not, if the abstract process that they have would be perfect or not. An Amazon company would emerge from a postmodern perspective. And then you'd have to see what are the elements that gave rise to this organization. And then just to end, this is a question for you to reflect until our next meeting, is you as a system. And this is a classic question. Several philosophy books ask this question. The question is, so I don't want you to write anything, say anything, it's just you in your head, in your review, in your mindset. So the question is the following. You discover, and I hope this is, nobody's going through this now, please excuse me in advance if someone is facing this situation. But you just discover that you have, you're diagnosed with a terrible illness, life and death situation, okay? What would you do? Okay, it's a life and death situation, like short time to make decisions. What would you do? And I will discuss this next, during our next meeting next Wednesday.
Awesome. So thank you, Mauricio. I think we're reaching the end of our presentation today. We can try to address some of the questions we have in the chat, and we actually have an after party coming up right after. So if you'd like, feel free to stay after, and we'll address even more questions that we aren't able to get to. But there's been some talk in the chat about what is a chair, and addressing a chair with the sole mindset of it being a network of services. Can you elaborate on, I guess, your perspective on how a chair can aid us in that context beyond just being a product, and seeing it as a multitude of services, as well as in tandem with being a product?
Yeah. So the object itself, the physicality of the object, right? Let's say the pre-modern part of the object, the physical structure of the object has no meaning, right? From this postmodern perspective. Imagine, without mentioning names, I went through a situation where a young person saw a chair that I saw, and I understood that it was not a chair, although it looked like a chair. Was really strange. And this young person, a teenager, went and sat down in the chair, used the chair as a sitting. And the owner of the house ran and said, "Don't sit, this is not a chair, this is a work of art." So the artist used the forms of a chair, but sold it as a work of art. And it was kind of clever when you understand. So, okay, he took a form that is kind of obvious to all of us and called this form a work of art. And it was like couple of thousands, the price of that work of art. So in that sense, what you buy, what the person that owns this chair bought was not a chair, was not, the product was not a chair, was a work of art. Again, just to make sense that what you're buying when you buy a chair, that a chair as a product, you're buying this system. Oh no, I want something to work with and sit on while I'm working, and that it's comfortable and that says something about me. And so that's what you're buying. You're not buying that object, that physicality. I don't know if I answered, but
yeah, I think that was encompassed the question pretty well. I'm hoping we're able to extend these conversations even further into the after party, so feel free to stay back along. I think we'll wrap up with a last question around organizations. So I have here in the chat, so can you elaborate on whether you think service design can equip organizations where more than one paradigm is at conflict? So for example, an organization might be postmodern, yet have to cope with members in a modern mindset, and vice versa.
Yeah, there's no pure organization. Like that's the purpose of the image of the tree that cast a shadow on the premodern tree, cast a shadow. So when we talk, and then we will talk about understanding people from this perspective, from the knowledge and human interests, which are these three, the premodern, modern, and postmodern, you have to untangle them. So, okay, this organization, they have this, at surface level, a very premodern perspective. Now, there is the process. You need to follow the process. No matter what the process will guide you. But you know, from a postmodern perspective, that is not possible. So there are things that are modern. So you have to tap into an organization of these, the mindsets, the people that share this mindset of, no, I can control. And there will be also people in that same organization that is, no matter if they don't describe themselves as postmoderns, they know that, yeah, you have to keep an eye on things because they change. You have to adapt all the time and constantly adjust. So when you're able to see those historical paradigms, the layers, and you're able to craft either your approach or way of understanding this organization or way of understanding a person. As a designer, we tend to interview people and capture this. Oh, the person expects an abstract process that will always work. So this is a layer. But as a postmodern, you know that this is not gonna happen. So how can I protect this person or offer them some structure that they will feel that it worked, although I tricked in a good way the system.
Awesome. We've had a lot of nice conversations around the topics you presented today, Mauricio. So thank you. And thank you everyone who, with your contributions and questions. We're going to try to address them as best we can, either during the after party or within our follow-up communication. So stay tuned. We also have a follow-up session, the second part to this 3-part series called Places of Truth. So in order to get a bit deeper into the subject and then cover the next layer, we want to extend the conversation. So please feel free to come out next Wednesday, same time, as Mauricio will be going over the continuation of how to consider a new mindset. And then we have our knowledge and human interests session happening the following week after that.
Yep.
So yeah, looking forward to the conversations. Please stay connected with us. We have our meetup groups, which contains all of our latest content and upcoming events. So we have the Service Design Pittsburgh, Service Design DC, and Service Design Atlanta. We will message those groups in the chat. So feel free to click and join. And we also want to hear you guys' feedback for this session. We love hearing from you guys and how to make talks like this even better. So we're also sending a link to the feedback form in the chat. Please, when you have a second, can you fill that out so that we may consider that for our following sessions? And I'll pass it on to wrap it up.
So hi everyone, I'm Maria. I am part of the SDN chapter in Atlanta. And just to wrap up, we want you guys to be aware of a few things that the SDN has planned. So later this year, we have the Virtual Service Design Global Conference. It's taking place October 22 and 23. It's happening virtually, and then next year we have the Global Conference, which hopefully will happen in April in Copenhagen. And then other things that you can take a look at if you're interested in learning more about service design and staying up to date in the latest conversations. There's the Touchpoint journal, and you can get that on the SDN website, and you could also become a member of the SDN community. So that's a short announcement. Another member from the Atlanta chapter that is here is Shreya. So if you have any questions for us, we will stick around. And that's it.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks for attending.
Yeah, so we're transitioning now into the after party. Feel free to stay here with us to continue talking about postmodernity with Mauricio and with each other. We want to use this time to connect and talk about some topics that we might not have been able to address. So yeah, thanks everyone for coming. It was nice to hear from you. It was nice to hear from Mauricio. Thank you, Mauricio. And we'll see you soon.
Thanks, Kelly. Mauricio, if you can comment, one of the earlier questions that we weren't able to have a chance to ask from the chat was around what's the role of designers in periods of normalcy and periods of disruption. Would you be able to comment on that a bit? You're on mute.
Oh, yeah. So we will be able to talk about creative destruction next seminar, the next session. And again, what do you understand by designer, right? It's always like this. Are you asking the designer as a modern person that can control and make it rain and create miracles, or you're defining this designer as someone that actually co-evolve with what this designer has at hand, right? The creative destruction connection is interesting because you make a connection with innovation, right? And if you know, if you ever had the chance to check the statistics of entrepreneurship and innovation, you know that 99% of the ideas they're not successful, right? And there's a very interesting correlation with seeds of trees, that 99% of them, they don't become a tree. Or the eggs of a turtle. 99% of them don't become an adult turtle. But the thing is, when you interview the innovator, the entrepreneur, the designer that succeed, this person will tell you, no, I had the vision and I saw and I pursued, and you can hear the modern perspective loud and clear, right? I control this. But the fact is, when you interview all the 99% that didn't work, they would tell you almost the same thing. Of course, you will not commit yourself to such an effort if you didn't believe in what you're doing, right? And but we only interview this. It's a survivor's bias, right? We only interview the one that succeeded. But from a postmodern perspective, you know that there is a system, and the system, like the App Store, right? Apple creates this system that billions of apps or seeds are thrown there, and then you have some Facebooks or Uber or apps that survive and or thrive and are successful. So that's the point of the connection between innovation. And we will see that Schumpeter, which is one of the first that connected the Darwinian evolution to social science, one of the first at least that we have record, right? He used this frame of punctuated equilibrium or complex adaptive systems to understand innovation. And we will discuss more about this next session. So maybe we could explore a little bit more questions from this one.
Yes, definitely. I want to open the floor up to those here in the after party to come off mute and ask your question. If you want to go ahead, and we'll give the floor.
Any questions? We have 10 more minutes.
It could be comments as well if you just want to make a comment to Mauricio.
No comments. Yeah.
I do have some additional questions that were asked that we didn't get to. One question was around what body of knowledge is the paradigm drawn from, and the background of what you went over today.
Oh no, this is only the last one. This is knowledge and human interest. We will discuss. Let's leave this cliffhanger.
Okay.
At first, I want you all to have access to this narrative, right? On the last one, we will go a little bit more into the structures of this narrative, and then you'll be able to verify if they make sense, if the narrative makes sense or not. But not, I guess it would be to overwhelm you with the structure just right now.
Well, I mean, I think what you're underscoring here is that this is really a journey that we're going on together over the course of the 3 series. And sort of as you showed at the beginning with the Russian doll graphic, you know, we're sort of going to be diving deeper and deeper in over the next 2 sessions to sort of make fuller perspective of it.
Yeah.
I have a comment.
Please. Oscar.
Hello. Hi, everyone. What I think, or what this made me think of, this conversation about objective truth and subjective truths, especially today in the world that we're living in, people have such a push and pull on, I think I know what's right, or I have this truth that I believe in, and I'm trying to look at things objectively, and they're not matching up. And I think we're seeing that really on like a global scale. And so That's something I was thinking about during this
Yeah,
conversation.
that's places of truth. That's the whole purpose of the next session, is to understand this. Like, how the hell a person can believe that the earth is flat? Like, what's happening? And it's actually understandable. You can actually understand how this happens. And it depends on where these people place what they call truth, right?
Or the earth is hollow, as my teenager now thinks.
Yeah, or I don't know. And then you can go all over the place, right? And,
Can I jump in and ask a quick question?
please.
Is there not a problem with using this is a bit nitpicky, but is there not a problem using the word truth when we talk about these things like flat earthers or hollow earthers? That's a thing I didn't even know. If we say that these are truths, right? Multitude, then are we not challenging our own truths, or what is objectively true? You know, the term subjective truth seems a bit juxtaposed, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, but we will see that the classic definition of truth is whatever you see around you that corresponds to what you have inside your head, your mindset. This is truth, right? So if I think that the earth is not moving, this is what we're going to discuss next session. I'm not moving. I don't feel moving. The sun seems to be moving. Yeah, so the earth is not moving, it's the sun. And it makes total sense. It's logic. My perception tells me that I'm not moving. The earth is not moving. The sun is moving. Okay, so it's not, and for us designers, it's humbling and even more precious when you are trying to understand someone else, right? If someone tells you, oh, the earth is flat, or whatever, the virus will not contaminate me. Like, of course, you say, my goodness, it's a virus. A virus doesn't care. No, but it will not. If you have this thing and say, okay, what this person is seeing around them, that connects and contributes to what he or she has as a mindset. And then you can try to alter what's around this person to show that, hey, what you're seeing around does not correspond to what you have in your hand.
Okay, so let me follow that up with another question. Let's introduce the term fact into this conversation. Right now we have fact and we have truth. If we go with the definition that you gave me at the start of your response to my first question, then truth can be subjective, but fact cannot be. So what do we say about the truth or the truths that are in line with facts versus the truths that are not?
Yeah, this is the two most important theories of truth. One is the correspondence, and the other is the coherent or coherence theory. The coherence, a truth is only truth if everything confirms this whatever statement you're making. Correspondence is not, it's if people around me say that it is, it is. Okay? And nothing around me, I'm not paying attention to anything that distracts or detracts my truth. It is. What is the difference would be that the truth is very personal, truthfulness, and fact are things that are corroborated by many people. And but again, you can have all the people corroborating the same incorrect fact, the same. And then, okay, I'm not moving, the Earth is not moving, the sun is moving. So yeah, do you agree with me? Yes, I agree. Yeah, we're not moving. We're the center of the planetary system. Who can show me something different?
Okay.
Yeah, I think as long as people have their groups that are in agreement, fact doesn't necessarily matter to them.
It will not. Yeah, and it's clearly, when you look back in history,
Today.
Yeah. Look back in history, it can be like 5 minutes ago, but definitely, if people kind of confirm what you're saying, that's and in sciences like this, that's why whenever you see a scientist categorically saying that something, and one thing that people get shocked when you say, no, science is not about truth, right? It's not the point of science to determine truth. Science is to never stop questioning. And people say, no, science will tell me the truth. No, this is religion. Who cares about truth is religion. Science does not care about truth. Science cares about questioning. Oh, you told me that, I don't know, the atom could not be broken. Oh, okay, I will try. I'll try to break. Oh, you told me that, I don't know, I can't go to Mars. Okay, I will go to Mars. I'll try to go to Mars. That's the process of science. Is the ever questioning whatever. There's no end. There's a famous quote of Einstein that he says, if we knew what we were doing, it wouldn't be called research. Okay, so there's no a point on finding the truth. This is, philosophically speaking, is a concern of religions, not science. Okay, science. Sorry.
I wanted to add a thought to that as well. You know, since leaving school and being out in the field and working, I'm always playing that devil's advocate. And I loved the Carl Sagan quote that you had at the beginning of this about always questioning and kind of challenging the status quo. And I am not a flat earther, but many of my friends, I will always talk to them and I kind of push that, well, but how do you know? But what, you know, why do you think that it's flat? I mean, for so long it was, and then all of a sudden it wasn't because we proved it, but you know, humanity believed it for so long. And so in everything that I'm doing, you know, with design and with my job, I'm always kind of like pushing and questioning, but why are we thinking this way? But why are we doing it that? Are those the right questions to be asking? And it reminded me of a really great masterclass that's out there by, what's his name? The astrophysicist. It's about scientific communication. Neil deGrasse Tyson, yes. Yeah. Very great masterclass on thinking, communicating scientific theory, research, etc. Yeah. Just wanted to throw that out there too.
We will discuss a little bit. Like Hannah Arendt, she says, instead of being concerned about truth, focus on transparency, right? Why do you believe the Earth? What you gain from believing that the Earth is flat? What do you gain by believing that Black people do not deserve? It's not about discussing your